Today's announcement by Stephen Conroy is a characteristically chaotic, half-baked series of thought bubbles. This minister really should try to finish something before he kicks off a new idea. It's worth bearing in mind that he announced a deal on anti-siphoning nearly 2.5 years ago. This is arguably one of the most important elements in broadcasting regulation, and has been unable to turn that agreement into a piece of legislation. So we still haven't seen a bill. It may be that we'll get to the election without any legislation on anti-siphoning. Now, as far as this package is concerned, what Stephen Conroy is doing is responding to his outrage that the newspapers, particularly the News Limited newspapers, have seen fit to criticise the government and indeed him. And he's been venting his spleen for some time, and he's come up with this idea of a public interest test to be overseen by some public interest media advocate, a new government official, a government-appointed official, to oversee the media. He says this is in order to ensure a diversity of voices, and yet we've never had such a diversity of voices as we have today in the news media. The internet, as the super platform, the hyper platform, has allowed Australians to have access to more sources of news, opinion, fantasy indeed, often, sometimes, masquerading as news and opinion. But all of that material is now available online in a way it never was before. The barriers to competing with newspapers have never been lower, as the newspapers are discovering to their chagrin. We've also, of course, have the ACCC, the competition regulator, which is there to ensure that there are no mergers which are anti-competitive. So it vetoed Channel 7's attempt to buy into Fox Sports. So what on earth is this public interest media advocate going to do? What on earth is this public interest test going to be? What are the criteria to determine public interest? Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen Conroy hasn't seen fit to tell us that. Those are sort of details that we may or may not be told sometime before the end of next week, which is the due date by which this legislation has to be passed. I don't know why he's in such a hurry. Perhaps that's about as long as he thinks Julia Gillard has got left. Perhaps he thinks that's about how long he's got left as Communications Minister. But you know, these issues are very important. The work that you do as journalists is just as important as any of the work that we do as legislators. And any attempt by the government to regulate or further circumscribe the media has got to be viewed with the greatest of suspicion, particularly a government that seems determined to cow the media, to bully the media into not criticising it. Now, you would think that proposals of this kind, when they were floated by a minister, would be floated with some detail, presented with some detail and precision, but they're not. We've got a 1.5-page press release which is obscure enough and not rendered any more coherent by the minister's press conference. And then we're told we've got to pass it in less than 2 weeks with a sort of a gun held to the Parliament's head for whatever reason. These are all important issues. Freedom is at stake, liberty is at stake, democracy is at stake. And they deserve proper due process and consideration by the Parliament, and certainly not to be presented in this take it or leave it, we won't negotiate, arrogant bullying manner of Stephen Conroy.